Our next guest, another gun rights stalwart, is Congressman Dan Bishop, who has the second best record in the Second Amendment among North Carolina's congressional delegation, differing from Congressman Budd only in the number of pro-gun bills he signed on to as a co-sponsor. I'm happy to say that Congressman Budd and Bishop were the only Republicans in the delegation with the guts to vote against the National Defense Authorization Act because it contained a provision for red flag gun confiscation for military personnel. Congressman Bishop has served the 9th Congressional District, which we're in, since 2019. Congressman Bishop's family has hailed for generations from Bladen County in the eastern end of North Carolina's 9th District, but he was born and lives in Charlotte at the western end. Dan brings to the House an impressive background in policymaking, legal work, and commitment to conservative North Carolina values. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Congressman Dan Bishop.
Thank you, Paul. It's great. Paul, I haven't met you before. We've had a lively correspondence during the time I was in the General Assembly and since, and I'm always grateful for that. Larry, good to see you, and what a marvelous, I agree with everyone who's commented, what a marvelous facility. You know, as they say on the internet right now, do you know what time it is? Have you heard that expression? Do you know what time it is? And President Trump has told us, as he put it, they're not really after him, they're after you, and he's just in the way. Ted said that we're in this moment that you know, they say, you see this a lot, people say every election they tell you this is the most important, but it really is. Well, I'm going to nail that down just a little bit. The most important election was the last election in 2020. But you all know what happened in that election. Are you here? You all know how that worked out, and you know where we are since. Ladies and gentlemen, frankly, ladies and gentlemen, I thought Paul might have a guess. Maybe it was Trump calling in or something like that. But where we've been since then is dangling over the abyss. If you consider all the ways in which this country has, over the last year, barely avoided catastrophe, even as disasters are emerging everywhere, then you know. How could it be that that last election was the most important and yet this one is the most important? That is because we can only dangle over the abyss so long. Think about how they do things, ladies and gentlemen. You're seeing the pattern. When I say, do you know what time it is, are you seeing the pattern? Just this weekend, criminal defendants targeted by the DOJ were acquitted of an alleged plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan on evidence of entrapment by the FBI. In this week, an American who was in Washington on January 6th to protest and entered the Capitol only because Capitol police officers waved him in and was peaceful inside and took photos, he nonetheless was targeted with prosecution by the DOJ for felonies, and he's now been acquitted. Do you know that the FBI ringleader who was in charge of the Whitmer prosecution, in which the entrapment evidence was accumulated, do you know that he transferred to the January 6th prosecutions? Do you see the pattern? They don't represent a majority of us, ladies and gentlemen, but they are aggressive about the use of power. They want to use power to tell you that you don't have the right to know what your children are being taught or to intercede in it if they're being taught something ridiculous. They have co-opted institution after institution, higher learning, media, the federal bureaucracy, grade schools. It goes on and on. Corporations, right? What's happening in Florida? Turning corporate power to try to intimidate a democratically elected governor and legislature. Do you know what time it is? It's the time for Americans to step forward and reclaim our country, ladies and gentlemen. You know, when you're in office, they tell you, you got to, first of all, you got to make sure you don't really step out of your lane. Don't get involved in other people's races. Those days are gone, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to tell you something. This is a moment you cannot afford to miss. You must send Ted Budd to the United States Senate from North Carolina. You must do it. I think maybe somebody's endorsement carried more weight than mine, but I entered that race and endorsed early on. And I also want you to know something else. They have bare partisan control of the North Carolina Supreme Court, and they've used the North Carolina Supreme Court as a super legislature to nullify the constitutional action of your legislature in terms of the drawing of districts. It's unconstitutional, ladies and gentlemen, and the basis on which they did it, they made up. So they tell me I should stay in my lane, but while they were doing that, they were entering orders all along. The judges of the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, most importantly, State Supreme Court, to change the date of our election, to suspend an election process that had already begun. And when they issue orders, they don't even say who's voted for them one way or the other. So, ladies and gentlemen, I've stepped out of my lane. I sued every member of the State Supreme Court and the State Court of Appeals to establish on strong authority that the First Amendment guarantees a right of access to court records, that they cannot deny us to know when we democratically elect our judges in North Carolina who signed what orders. I've got a hearing on that on the 18th of April for a preliminary injunction. We'll see what happens. Nonetheless, don't make any mistake. When I say I've sued those judges, some of them are sitting behind me. One of them's sitting behind me. But I don't think he really minds. I want you to know that everything is important this year, but do not fail to pay special attention to the election of our Court of Appeals and our Supreme Court. Republicans went 8 for 8 in those elections last year, and yet we continue to have a minority, a bare minority on the North Carolina Supreme Court. They've seen fit to do whatever they want to with their power, to act as a super legislature, as I said. But you have great opportunity before you. There is one Republican primary, and again, I know caution would indicate that a member of Congress has no business getting into that. It's not in his lane. But again, ladies and gentlemen, we can't afford now to do business as usual. And one of the persons who's running for the North Carolina Supreme Court, you're going to hear from, he's right behind me. I've endorsed him. His name is Trey Allen. Trey Allen, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to step on his time by talking to you about Trey, but I want you to know, I wouldn't step forward in a primary for the North Carolina Supreme Court unless we are in the circumstances that we are in. Now, there's another person behind me who's running for North Carolina Supreme Court. He doesn't have a primary, though, but he's outstanding. And when the time comes in the general election, if he wants an endorsement, he can have it right now, but I'll definitely be behind him then. That's Rich Dietz, who's back here, too. And there's another great young man back here, a district court judge in Mecklenburg County. And I was with him when he was elected then, and he's going to be a great addition to the North Carolina Court of Appeals, Michael Stadding, right over there. So some people might get mad at me, but let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it's the same for you as for me. This is a time to step outside your lane. You see what they're doing. Do you know what time it is? That's the question. Going out to see President Trump in Selma. He's stepping in on behalf of candidates all over the country. Because again, as he says, they're not after him. They're after you. He's in the way. That's where we are. And if you hear me saying to you that co-opted and corrupted institution after institution, oh my goodness, sometimes I get from some people who see things the way we do, Gosh, have we lost? Is it all over? And the answer is no, because of people like you who know what your rights are, who know the source of your rights. It was laid out in our Declaration of Independence. We're created by God, and by virtue of that relationship, we're imbued with rights, fundamental rights. And government exists by our consent. And the right relationship with government is not that government tells us to do, we tell government what to do. We tell government what to do. And government's responsibility is not to use its power to deprive us of our rights. Its responsibility is to use its power to secure our rights. There are people who don't see it that way. There was always a consensus in this country, even though we had different ideas about some methods. I would submit to you that whether that consensus still holds is in grave doubt. And you can see it in the targeting of people by the FBI. We can't, I sit on the Judiciary Committee, and Jerry Nadler's the chairman. Y'all know Jerry Nadler? Jamie Raskin from Maryland, Corey Bush, some great guys on the other side. This week, they were reorganizing the FBI to focus on domestic terrorists, a special focus on white supremacists. We offered an amendment to add Antifa, and they said, no, can't do that. They want to use the FBI to target moms and dads. Have you heard about that? Have you heard about the Attorney General's memo and the threat tag, the EDU official's threat tag? The Counterterrorism Division of the FBI created a special tag, information tag in counterterrorism databases to be able to apply to moms and dads who had the temerity to show up and protest before school boards across the country. Do you know what time it is? It's time, ladies and gentlemen. The American people, the awesome power, resourcefulness, and resilience of the American people must come forward this year. You must elect Ted Budd to the United States Senate. You must return control of the House of Representatives, the gavels and the subpoena power to the Republican Party. You must elect a strong Republican majority to the North Carolina Supreme Court. You must do what Americans do. It is our government. The government responds to us. The government is responsible to secure our rights. That is the government you must demand. That is the government you must make sure is delivered. God bless you all. Glad to be with you. Thank you.